Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's Skillz webinar, Level Up Your Game with the latest Skillz SDK. My name is David Dolnick with Skillz, and I have the distinct privilege of moderating today's webinar. I'm delighted to introduce you to Sam Baker. Sam is a product manager at Skillz. Sam focuses on player aspirations and tendencies, taking those insights to craft product strategy and feature development. Sam's love of video games and player experiences are reasons why Skillz is his dream job. Please say hi, Sam.
Hi guys, how you doing today?
Today we're excited to provide you with an overview of how to level up your game with the latest Skillz SDK. We'll save about 20 minutes to answer your questions at the end of the webinar, but you don't have to wait until then to submit your questions. Please use the chat button on the lower left to send questions during the presentation. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. A few quick housekeeping items before we get started. All participants will be muted throughout the duration of the presentation to ensure the best audio quality. During the presentation, if you should encounter any audio issues, please refresh your browser and check your computer's audio setting. Again, submit your questions anytime during the webinar. Just click the chat button in the corner of the screen. Lastly, we're recording today's webinar, and we'll share a link with you in our follow-up. That way you can listen to it again and share it with others who may be interested. Okay, now the question everyone loves talking about, GDPR. We'd like to kick this webinar off by asking everybody how comfortable you are with your company's GDPR readiness. Great, it looks like we have a variety of answers here. Now I'm going to let Sam kick it off. Take it away, Sam.
All right, thank you guys for joining us today. It's always good to get some input on GDPR to start with. We'll touch on that pretty early in our presentation. Again, as David said, we've got 30 minutes for content and 20 for questions, so please provide those. A little bit of additional background on myself. I lead our product development team here. Every feature in the SDK is kind of my responsibility to make sure it's working well for our players, is adding value for you guys, and is what we need to take all of our games forward. So without further ado, we'll start with what's in our latest release. The highlights are an improved chat system that has led to increased player KPIs. That's kind of the exciting and fun feature. We have improved data protection and compliance, particularly as it relates to GDPR, which is very much the hot button, maybe a little less curb appeal, but a pretty exciting and important thing to make sure that you're staying ahead of. We have some industry-leading tech changes with regards to iPhone X compatibility and how we do some of our back-end tracking. And then finally, and probably, at least for me, the most exciting next step for Skillz as a company and leveling up all of our games and projects is more streaming and eSport support and live event support. There will actually be a live event going on throughout the webinar that we'll touch on in a few moments. So to get things started, GDPR and Skillz. What does this really mean? The approach that Skillz took with this was to make sure that we were fully compliant. We vetted this with our legal team, with other industry-leading firms, and we developed what came to be really a seamless means to distribute the SDK to European users and not impact United States users. What does that mean in more simple terms? U.S. users won't really see any change, though we are able to apply this change to any geographic region as we need to. And European users will see the necessary checkboxes, opt-ins, explicit consent for the users that are required by GDPR. And then we've also updated our backend and data tracking so that our PII and encryption and all the necessary data storage is in line with GDPR. So put simply, GDPR is related to checkboxes, and ultimately, if we kind of back up, the purpose of GDPR is to give users explicit control about how their information is being used, how it's being shared, how it's being analyzed. And so Skillz has always had this checkbox of I consent to being contacted. It's one of the most important methods. And that's usually historically been left auto-checked for US users. We'd like to be able to communicate with all of our users. We've now developed the features that are necessary to geogate users and based on their current location, and so that we can leave this box unchecked, and then by that box being unchecked, the way their data is treated on our back end is then left as compliant with GDPR. So that's probably the biggest and most user-facing change. The all-important question that we'll hopefully head off at the pass is, as we were thinking about this, a lot of folks ask, well, how do I know if my Skillz game is GDPR compliant? What do I need to do to make it that way? It's as simple as update your game to the latest SDK. If you are operating on 20.1.4 or higher, which is available on our developer portal, as well as the Unity Asset Store, but if you download that from developers.skillz.com and you integrate it, you are automatically GDPR compliant with regards to users' information, their behaviors, and actions on the Skillz system. So in terms of what needs to be done by you guys, nothing outside of the ordinary other than update to the latest software we've provided. Some additional background is we will be able to apply this technology to any other future data concerns that come up. It's something that Skillz is very committed to staying abreast of. So that means there's talk that California as a state might start to put in some similar rules, or different countries may begin to restrict what companies can and can't do, and ultimately give users more choice in their experience. And the way we built our GDPR technology is that we are now have all the building blocks we need to basically respect those local legislations and rules as they move forward. I think that's about it on GDPR. We're happy to answer more questions, so please put them in the chat if you need to. Some of our top performing games have already updated. You'll notice Cube, Bubble Shooter, and Diamond Strike. All of these are available at games.skillz.com if you want to go see this experience. Again, if you're a US user, you won't see a whole lot. I think another and final important note is if you have concerns about your company's GDPR readiness, a big issue is how and where you distribute your games. If your games are only distributed in US app stores, or more importantly, not in European Union app stores, then you're in a better position. It's always important, and you will need to update to the latest SDK to be fully protected. But if you're looking for a short-term solution or you have concerns, obviously consult your legal team, but ultimately a good first step and something Skillz considers doing is pulling your apps from any European app stores. I think a final note about that, which I probably glossed over, is that we consider the UK, despite its ever-changing status and relationship with the European Union, as far as legal guidance goes, the UK is considered a part of the European Union for our GDPR technology, and we are also in a position where we can change that easily if we need to going forward. All right, moving on to kind of some of the more exciting parts. Another big feature in the latest SDK is the ability to have a streamlined onboarding for new live events. So what this really means is if a user comes onto Skillz, maybe from a streamed event or a physical live event, they'll be able to press this Find Event button you're seeing in the bottom left, and they'll be able to seamlessly go straight into playing that tournament, which is great for user acquisition, framing your game as an eSport, and developing competition. So as this webinar is going on, if you go to games.skillz.com and download Diamond Strike, here, there will be a tournament going on with real cash prizes, and if you follow through and create an account, our match code is webinar. I've already put in my entry at a paltry 30,000 or something, but if you go play there, you'll be able to kind of see this new user flow in action. Diamond Strike is a house game of Skillz. It's pretty much our only game that we operate. We use it for mostly testing and data collection, so not something that's massive, but a game that's been around for a long time and continues to be a successful, fun game. For some small reference, Candy Crush, only a little bit different. So as we talk about what this feature means in terms of a streamlined FTUE and onboarding, it's ideal for industry conferences like E3 and GDC. That's actually what informed a lot of this feature development. Was David's team over here at Skillz would be on the floor at GDC. We'd have live events going, and users realize they have to create an account, go through the whole tutorial and FTUEs, which are really well optimized for what we'd call traditional UA, whether that's coming from Facebook or people being purchased through other ad networks. But what we realized is when someone goes and the first thing they want to do is play in some event because it's on our Twitch channel, or they've actually started their own streaming event, or they're at a conference, they want to skip a lot of that bloat and just go straight into playing. So that's why this Find Event button was put down there. It's a big step into turning games into competitive esports and framing the competition that way. If your first experience with Skillz and whatever game is integrated Skillz is a large group experience where there's 100 players on the leaderboard and there's $50 on the line. That's a wholly unique play experience that a lot of games don't really supply in terms of an onboarding experience. And while this technology for us is somewhat in its infancy, everywhere we're seeing it, the users respond positively and the KPIs for these types of installs are very strong. So once again, just like all of the things with GDPR, assuming you integrate the most recent SDK, this is built into your game, and there will be the Find Event button there. You're able to go to events.skillz.com and make your own events, or the Skillz marketing team will begin to create events in games as they grow and become larger on our network. So we're going to take a quick look at a video here what this user flow looks like. So the example we're looking at is someone who's already installed Diamond Strike. You're opening it the first time on a cold open, as we call it. You would press your existing user sign in. You have the option to find event down in the bottom corner. We look for events by geo area. If there's none in your area, you enter the match code. Players press enter, confirm that you're creating an account. Upon the next button, you're already into the event. You're seeing your live event details. You're seeing the prize list and the leaderboard. We ask players to confirm their age because legally to give away cash prizes, that's a requirement, which is always the case on Skillz. Once you've completed this, you've hopped straight into the game. And that's pretty much the fastest way we could get users into a game while checking all of our legal boxes and making sure they'd actually made an account. You'll notice this whole video is we're into the game at 49 seconds. It used to take about 7 minutes if you were doing it a simple way to get into your first live event, and you could obviously cheat your way there in about 2. So basically we cut out about 60–80% of the bloat and flow that was needed for users to get there, and that's helped with obviously all of the install funnel and KPIs that you would expect. Finally, this game and this live event and any other live event will be shown at Twitch at games.skillz.com. And generally speaking, it's something we'd love for you guys to check out. We're continuing to grow our streaming experience, and any game that comes onto our system, we start to show to users at some point once it reaches a decent size on our TV channels. We also have skills.tv.com, which is a native TV channel that we've spun out, but it's also broadcast on Twitch and YouTube. All right. One of the important things to talk about when we talk about this live event FTUE and our main FTUE, or first-time user experience, is the pros and cons of each and how they live in tandem, because we want to make sure that the core KPIs for your games are respected. Our main FTUE was optimized for what I'd call traditional UA, also known as Facebook, or just direct downloads. There's minimal information input. It's pretty guided in a narrow funnel that was really driving users to very high install to one game or completion of one game. That's probably the most important KPI we think about when we think about player behavior, is do you complete that first game? You've gone through all the trouble of clicking on an ad on Facebook, going to your app store, downloading it, opening it, making an account. But once they complete that first game, that's kind of the tandem of skills in your game where the rubber really meets the road of, did the user enjoy getting through the skills experience, and did they enjoy their first game? And our main FTUE has traditionally shown benchmarks across the industry, anywhere from 80 to 90+%. The live event FTUE, on the other hand, is only to less traditional UA, streaming, live events, physical events, straight to gameplay. And I'll back up a couple slides here to show you. We put the Find Event button down and kind of out of the way, so the user, if they're just used to spamming through the simplest flow, they'll go through the traditional first-time user experience, which has more tutorials and more guidance. But if they know and they have a reason they want to be here, they'll press that Find Event button and go through that funnel. So we tried to make sure that the two could coexist side by side and that we weren't impacting or hurting our main user acquisition tool, but we were also laying the groundwork for a much more competitive and exciting social experience. I think that covers it for our FTUE. We're always happy to answer questions about the live event or the main FTUE and in general, since I know that's a point of great concern in any app development, is how you get those users through the first 5–10 minutes of their experience. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is chat. So with that, the important question is, what does chat mean to you guys? How important is it for a mobile game? And how are you viewing chat? All right, thank you guys. Looks like we have, again, answers across the board. Some background on chat for us. We built chat, and it was first released in December of this year, and our rollout has been slow because we want to make sure that we measure the KPIs and make sure that the chat system is working. Skillz views chat is a pretty essential addition to a game. It creates a social retention component where you can, there's nothing better than David saying, hey Sam, come on Skillz, check out my score, check out the leaderboard I'm on, play in this tournament with me. That's the type of experience that without chat, there's no marketing campaign that Skillz can make, there's no ad we can serve, there's no push we can send, there's no awesome game improvement that any of us can make that's as awesome as someone's friend saying, come do this thing with me. And so we really want to facilitate that organic social experience. Our newest version of chat is pretty much now ready for wider rollout. We're enabling on a game-by-game basis, mainly because of moderation. That's one of the biggest things we've added. We have player moderators who've been deputized by our CA department, as well as our CA department is monitoring chat. That means any lewd or abusive behavior that goes on, there's always a sheriff in town to regulate that and make sure that it's appropriate. And one of the reasons that we enable chat on a per-game basis is we need to make sure that game is big enough for it to be worth the effort to moderate that environment. A very small chat game with 2 users is more of a risk for all of us, both developers and Skillz, for a player to have a bad experience that's unmoderated. So that's really our threshold. The social features that we've added are things like @mentions. You'll get push messages. So we've modeled some of this off Slack, Facebook Messenger, and iMessage. The idea here being if David says, come play in this tournament with me, we want to make sure there's a push message that gets to me, there's an @mention that highlights me, and I feel motivated to come onto the Skillz system. As a result of a quality moderation system, as well as the social features that are driving users to play more, we're seeing really strong KPIs in our early chat data. We're going to be sharing case studies and white papers as that data really matures, but at this point we're pretty happy with what we're seeing from players, and ultimately Skillz sees this as a foundational building block for future social features. Some kind of let me make sure I touched on all of our high points here. One thing I talked about was more the staff and player moderators. We also have intelligent moderation with regards to if a player puts in profanity, we'll X that out. If they upload a lewd profile picture, that's something that we filter on the spot, as well as we audit by way of human controls. There's some spotlight and animation that helps users learn this new experience. One of the challenges when we develop features at Skillz is eSports for everyone. That means eSports for everyone on Android, iOS, tablet, landscape, portrait, old, young, new to games, loves games, not really sure why they're in this game. It really could be our ideal customer. And so some of those users need a little bit more tutorial about what is this chat experience and others do not. And so simply things like @mentions, if we're familiar with Slack, pretty used to it. If that's not something that a user is familiar with, we want to make sure they understand how to use that feature. And I think those are the highlights of chat. The other big thing, similar again to GDPR compliance, is how do I get chat? Integrate the latest SDK. Once you've reached a pretty, reach out to our integrations team and we'll consider chat. And then at that point, from there forward, the moderation, the CA support, the player moderation, all of that is handled by Skillz. So once it's on, that's an ecosystem that we have folks actively monitoring. We have technology and alerts making sure that KPIs are staying strong. So in a lot of senses, that's a value that we try to provide, and we think that as developers are, your guys' specialties is usually the games and the player experience itself, and we're starting to really grow chat to be something that we can bring to kind of add to the whole competitive and social mixture of a good Skillz game. I think those are the big ones on chat. A final plug is this is where we're going, things we're thinking about in the future are topic-specific channels, tutorial-specific channels, VIP channels, and social tournaments inside of chat. So this is really the beginning of chat for us, and we're very happy with the initial metrics we've seen, and we're going to continue to build on top of this actively. Next, on to probably one of our most asked for but most simple features is iPhone X support. The 20.1.4 SDK is fully compliant with the iPhone X. That means your notch is handled properly. What we've done is remove the status bar entirely. Most immersive games have done this. Larger games like Clash Royale have taken that step. And so it's really allowed the player to focus on the game. And then we've also handled this in landscape, which is actually in terms of designers here, a bit more of a unique challenge is getting all of your CTAs away from the notch when it's on the side of the screen. An important plug for this is while the Skillz SDK itself is fully compliant and supports iPhone X out of the box, your game, if it's built in Xcode, will need to have some changes made to it. We have documentation about this on our support site, and if you're building apps, it's relatively straightforward. But the SDK itself will be ready to go on an iPhone X. The game itself will need some minor tweaks to your Xcode project, and our integrations team is always available on developers.skillz.com or by email to help navigate those issues. It's pretty simple. It's a few drop-downs and changes, but we do see the occasional game come in that says, oh, I thought I took care of everything. I updated the latest SDK, but then the gameplay itself doesn't really respect the notch or deal with it. So that's the big one there. Other pieces of technology that we probably didn't touch on that are important in the background here, we updated our tracking software as well as our after-game ad serving, as well as a few of the internal SDKs we use. This allows Skillz to have better understanding of what users are coming to the game, help with user acquisition, and overall track users across our system. So this was the way we focused on this internally was the sure bet was GDPR. We all needed that. The long bet was chat, which we're really happy with how that's paying off. And then we had kind of the housekeeping items of iPhone X, etc. And then the FTUE is something that's kind of been cooking for a while for us, and we're really happy to finally roll out. And that's really to support the eSports component of how people feel about these games as competitive and social gaming experiences. I think that touches on all the big ones for us. Happy to answer any questions that you folks have, and we've got plenty of time for those.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Sam. And as the event manager at Skillz, I can tell you the FTUE is a huge help for me. We're at events, as you mentioned, E3, GDC. I'm on board. It's more seamless. So just want to remind everybody, the match code today, webinar, you can visit skillstv.com to watch all the action live. You can watch yourself playing live, watch replays, watch the rest of your participants. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So before we jump into the Q&A, a few quick notes. Watch for an email with a link for today's presentation. If you have any questions about Skillz or interested in learning how we can help you monetize your game, please click on this poll question or send us an email to launch@skillzdev.com. That's launch@skillz, that's with a Z, DEV.com. Thanks a lot, and now we're going to jump into
All right. It looks like our first question is from Tural Patel. How much does time matter in terms of taking them from the game menu to the gameplay screen? I think you're getting at kind of what the numbers I was citing about the fact that our video is only about 57 seconds long. Generally speaking, for users that are coming into our games, what we've seen from the data is if they're looking for a specific event, a specific chat room, a specific person, high-intent, specialized users, you obviously want to facilitate that as much as possible. And so we want to get users there with as minimal friction, but we do have some legal boxes to check in terms of age validation and things like that. But on the flip side, more general users, we want to kind of ease them in a bit slower so that they learn the game, and learn the system. So generally speaking, the faster we can do anything in a first-time user experience, the better. And in a very unique and targeted use case like live events, we really took the opportunity to cut that time down as much as possible. I hope that answered your question there. All right, I think our next question is kind of how do we determine if someone is in the UK or the EU? This is done a couple of different ways. Ideally, it's done when a user gives us their geolocation. Geolocation is something that Skillz collects for all cache games so that we know that they're in the correct location. If a user never chooses to play a cache game, we don't ask them for their geolocation because we consider that to be somewhat intrusive. You see funnel drop off, and for very casual players that aren't ready to play cache yet, there's no need to ask for that, so we're not going to. And as a result, we're going to default back to their IP address. And when in doubt, we obviously always shade towards the user being in the European Union because we want to make sure that we are as cautious as possible. But by and large, we know pretty confidently where users are because they explicitly opt into their geolocation, and that allows Skillz to by way of device permissions, understand where the user is and make sure that we are handling their data and player experience correctly. All right, the next is, how do I get my game on our Twitch channel? That's always a great question. We see that from a lot of different folks. The first thing is integrate the latest SDK. The next is launch your game, and then finally have kind of a meaningful number of DAO. And once there's gameplay and users in there, we are always looking at even the newest and most upcoming games with in the hundreds, even under 1,000 DAO. We're always looking for new and exciting content to provide to our users. So anytime you put in a new game, the Skillz marketing team and our live events team is always looking into those, and definitely reach out to our integrations team or our developer relations team. All right. The next question we have is how do you get chat in the game? We kind of already touched on that. The big one is we do need a meaningful number of users in there. We're looking at 500 plus DAO. We want to make sure that that community is vibrant and large enough. A chat room with 2 people in it isn't very exciting. It also is more of a risk for all of us. Just a moment. So that's a big thing is, again, right sizing upside for all of us and possible downside for players. But once you have a game with 500 plus DAO, reach out to our integrations team and we will work on enabling that for your game. It's something that we're pushing as fast as we can to as many games, but it's also new technology that we need to make sure we learn about. Looks like we have a new question in about the status of turn-based games. Curious about the status of turn-based games, being able to have Skillz integrated. This is from Blake Merriam, sorry. Is that in a closed beta? Is it open? Also, what countries besides the US have cache-enabled games? So that's a 2-part question. I'll handle the cache-enabled one first and the turn-based second, since the cache one is easier. I don't have the list off the top of my head, but it is quite a few other countries. I know the UK and Australia and Canada all have successful player bases in them. If there's a particular country you're concerned about, let us know and we can get back to you. But Skillz we are cache-enabled in pretty much every country we can be, and I think that's around 100 or more. So if there's particular concerns you have about locations, please let us know and we'll get back to you. But Skillz is always kind of staying on top of where games are cache-enabled. In terms of in the U.S., one of the most recent victories was the state of Illinois in the last probably 6 months has changed their legislation as now a cache-enabled state. So whether that's a state or a country, it's something we're always aware of and we're happy to support because our goal is eSports for everyone. All right. The next part of that question was related to synchronous gameplay and kind of turn-based versions of the game. That is not explicitly in a closed beta. It's something that we are still working on launching. And it's something that if you have interest in, we are happy to work with you on. There's a section on our documentation page about synchronous integration. And it's something that if you want to integrate, we are here to do everything we can to support that. It's kind of the next step for us is supporting more live gaming experiences. For folks who might not be as familiar with this as Blake, historically Skillz has had what we called asynchronous turn-based. So think about this as like a game of checkers. I would make a move, I would send it to David, David could make a move 2 hours later, the next day, even a week later. Skillz is moving that to what we're calling synchronous or real-time synchronous play, where much like a real game of checkers, we would sit and play back and forth. Skillz has documentation on our site for that, and we're looking to launch our first games. So please sit there and see how we can support you. All right. The next question was a little bit more information on chat moderation. Who are the moderators? What are the rules? How does it work? So the moderators are twofold again. They're Skillz staff members. This is our CA team, which is something that we've always provided, whether that's customer assistance or customer service for deposits, account management, troubleshooting bugs. Those folks are now there keeping an eye on the chat room. They're going in and moderating or banning users. We built a system that has a short-term mute and a long-term ban, which isn't uncommon in gaming systems. So we model it after some other top chat games. And that's one side. The other side is the players. It's honestly most effective when you have player moderators. that are in games. Players respect each other more than they respect some higher authority sometimes. So they've been deputized, as you saw in the presentation. I'll go back a couple slides. These players will show up with the big mod badge that you see here in both the screenshot as well as the slide itself. And that's where we see like the most positive interaction. In our larger games like Cube, you'll see a conversation kind of going south of two players being rude to each other, or someone maybe hawking some, trying to use this as an advertising platform for their own interest. We do have community guidelines that have been published to the players as well as to the moderators, and when you see a conversation kind of going south and that mod badge pops up and says, hey, so-and-so, that's not acceptable here, you see usually a positive uptick and rally around that action. And so these are players that are trained by our CA staff. It's a very small and select group of players, mostly players who've been on the system for a long time, who know it well. They've played a lot of Cash NZ games. They've usually played a lot of games of different types. So these are really community resources, and we're trying to leverage them for other players. And then I think that mostly covers that question. Next up was what kind of KPIs have we seen from chat? Or what kind of performance improvements are we seeing? We've seen it across the board. Different games react in different ways, but the most important thing is typically conversion of depositors. I think a big concern we all see, at Skillz is players ask us or say, oh, I think I'm being matched against bots, or where are the real people, or that's impossible, that person beat me by too much. And Skillz, we don't do that to players, but that natural doubt creeps in. I even work here, and there are times when I'm like, how is it possible I lost by just 1 point? And you realize, well, that is actually good skill-based gaming. But when players see a chat bar at the bottom, they see other live human beings in the experience. All of this concern of, is this a scam? Are these bots? The biggest thing it honestly solves for players is trust. The chat experience will continue to grow and become more and more social, and I expect we'll see long-term retention. But the thing we're most pleased with is you're seeing a change in how players view the ecosystem because they realize they're not alone in there. There's other folks in there enjoying the experience with them, and that's leading to early funnel conversion that's really positive. And it's mostly, I think, for us, that chat bar at the bottom is supposed to be a win for trust more than anything, and I think it's accomplished that. Pardon me. Next question around KPIs, which is, again, everyone's favorite thing to talk about, and GDPR compliance. We haven't seen any degradation in KPIs for U.S. users. Obviously, we would have pulled back and course-corrected if we had. We wanted to, again, the U.S. player experience should be relatively unimpacted in any meaningful way. And then, obviously, with each SDK, we've cleaned up bugs, we've improved performance, speed, and new features like chat. So generally speaking, the current SDK we're on is the most widely adopted and what we consider to be the best work we've put forward. And GDPR has not put any drag on that in terms of needing to check the necessary boxes to remain compliant. All right, and I think our next question kind of comes back to streaming of how do folks end up with their game on our Twitch channel, or how do we actually really land on the stream? Again, there's a couple parts of that. Integrate a game, have some users, Skillz will find that game and put it on our stream, which will be both on our Twitch channel as well as skillstv.com. And then the other big important thing is live events. You're all able to go to events.skillz.com and make live events in the games themselves. I'd recommend doing it just as a casual player or as a game developer. It's a great way to see how that experience works. But then once a game grows to a size, Skillz puts live events in the games as soon as possible. We see that live events provide a social experience, diversified content, and ultimately help retain players and engage them much better. So as soon as you have a game that's integrated, working well, that's something that Skillz is going to be looking to feature on all of our media outlets as quickly as possible because it benefits all parties involved. I think that's another good time also for a plug with this SDK and all others. Skillz operates very much in a partnership model with all of our developers. So anytime your game is growing, that's great for you, that's great for us, and we're going to try to keep helping you do that. So if that's, whether that's turning on chat, whether that's putting your game on our Twitch channel, making sure there's moderation in your game, or solving any technical issues you may have, our goal is always to grow the gaming experience both for developers and players. So any window of opportunity we all see there, we're going to lean in and help support as much as we can, and one of the ways we do that is our Twitch channel. All right, I think that covers most of the questions.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. And I do recommend everybody to go to skillstv.com where you can continue this tournament. We've got unlimited entries. We're going to be ending at noon Pacific, so you've got about 80 more minutes or so to win some money, win some tickets, win some prizes. And I'm just going to throw up this last slide here to remind everybody, developers.skillz.com is where you want to go to learn more. Also, feel free to email anytime, launch@skillzdev.com. Again, that's launch@skillzdev.com. We're going to be sending an email again today with a link to the presentation. Really thank you guys all for joining, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, guys.